Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.
And good evening. It's Friday, February 25th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amitha Sharma in for Maya Trabulsi. Tonight, heavily armed Russian troops are heading toward the capital of Ukraine. And the U.S. is worried the city of Kiev could fall within days. The Biden administration is now moving to freeze the assets of Russia's president and foreign minister as part of broader sanctions. The heightened tensions are also being felt here in San Diego. Reporter Chris Wynn begins our coverage.
Tension and fear mounting in Ukraine. The capital city of Kyiv lit up overnight. This bridge leading from Russian-held Crimea into the main part of Ukraine is where President Volodymyr Zelensky says the most intense fighting took place and where his army was able to push back Russian troops. Residents across the country fleeing for their lives.
We don't know what's going to happen here next. I think the best thing right now is to be safe, is not be here.
Ukrainian leaders, including former President Petro Poroshenko, encouraging those staying to take up arms to defend their country.
We are standing in line for the weapons. We are standing in line to give our blood to our soldiers.
Even as air raid sirens wailed, Russia continued its propaganda campaign, claiming its troops are there on a peacekeeping mission.
Nobody is going to attack the people of Ukraine. Nobody is going to somehow degrade the Ukrainian armed forces. We are talking about preventing neo-Nazis and those promoting genocide from ruling this country.
Zelensky says the latest U.S. sanctions against Moscow aren't enough.
This morning we are defending our country alone. Just like yesterday, the most powerful country in the world looked on from a distance. Russia was hit with sanctions yesterday, but these are not enough to get these foreign troops off our soil. Only through solidarity and determination can this be achieved.
Chris Wynn, KPBS News.
Russian Americans are caught in the middle of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado visited a Russian Orthodox church that has been here for about 6 decades and tells us many are already experiencing anti-Russian sentiment at home.
Tucked away in the San Diego neighborhood, you'll find the St. John of Kronstadt Russian Orthodox Church. Inside, you'll find Archpriest Eugene Grushetsky, who leads the faithful in their mother tongue.
It's a piece of Russia here, so for them it's a piece of the heart also.
Every inch of this church is filled with icons and relics from the ancient past that help the faithful feel a little closer to God and their motherland.
It's old Russia. It's that called, we don't call Russia, we call Rus.
But since the invasion, a conflict between two peoples who are so intertwined, hearts are heavy here.
Troubled hearts after all this, because you know the war and something, invasions and collisions, it makes us, deprive us of the rest and peace inside.
His flock is a mixture of people from Russia and Ukraine.
My father from Ukraine, so.
And he himself is half Russian and half Ukrainian. He prays and counsels for both without distinction.
Yesterday, one woman came here from Ukraine and prayed me to pray for her and for her relatives in the Ukraine.
He says anti-Russian sentiment is also causing sadness. He's seeing more of it.
And mother complained, I don't know what to do.
He recently had to comfort a mother whose son is being bullied.
They're bullying against them. When they say, I'm Russian, they say, boo, boo, Russian. So in school, sometimes in school, even teachers say, Russia is very bad country. And people and the children say, okay, if it's a bad country, so everyone who is from Russia, bad people.
He urges adults to watch their words around children who interpret things literally, and for all of us to have dialogue that creates tolerance and understanding.
Even peace, yeah, not hatred, because if you hate it, it's not good ideology.
He says during these times when we feel helpless, we should look to our better angels and appeal to a higher power.
God bless Russia and Ukraine, and peace, grant them peace.
Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
The CDC is updating the metrics it uses to determine COVID-19 precautions and dropping strong mask recommendations for most of the country. It's now basing recommendations on hospitalizations, hospital capacity, and cases. The CDC says people living in counties at the low level do not need to wear a mask indoors. Those in counties at the medium level may want to mask up if they're at risk, while people living in counties at the high level will be advised that they should wear masks indoors.
This updated approach focuses on directing our prevention efforts towards protecting people at high risk for severe illness and preventing hospitals and healthcare systems from being overwhelmed.
According to the latest CDC data, San Diego County is in an area of high transmission, which means masking indoors is recommended. However, state and county health officials have made masks optional if you're vaccinated. Governor Gavin Newsom is winding down executive orders implemented in response to the pandemic. His office announced today that 95% of COVID-related executive orders will soon be lifted. The remaining provisions include maintaining the state's testing and vaccination programs, as well as protecting hospital capacity. Ketanji Brown Jackson is now the first black woman nominated to become a Supreme Court justice. Isabel Rosales reports on Jackson's packed resume and what those across the political aisle have to say.
Judge Ketanji Jackson.
President Joe Biden presenting his first nominee for the Supreme Court.
For too long, our government, our courts haven't looked like America.
If Ketanji Brown Jackson is confirmed, it would be one for the history books. She would be the first black woman Supreme Court justice. The 51-year-old had been considered the front runner to replace retiring Justice Stephen Breyer.
But please know that I could never fill your shoes.
Several prominent Democrats congratulating the judge. Jackson boasts credentials and experience. A Harvard grad, she became a federal judge in Washington, D.C. in 2013. Then Representative Paul Ryan, a Republican, introduced her during that confirmation hearing. They are related by marriage.
Our politics may differ, but my praise for Ketanji's intellect, for her character, for her integrity, it's unequivocal.
In one high-profile opinion, Jackson in 2019 rejected then-President Donald Trump's argument to bar a top aide from complying with a congressional subpoena, writing, "Presidents are not kings." Biden's pick has drawn criticism from some Republicans, with one describing the choice as affirmative action.
I can only hope that my life and career will inspire future generations of Americans.
In Washington, Isabel Rosales, KPBS News.
10 people have been arrested in connection with the murder of a photojournalist in Tijuana. Margarito Martinez, a prolific crime photographer, was shot and killed outside his home last month. The arrests were announced during Mexican President Andres Lopez Obrador's daily morning media briefing. No details were given about the suspects. The sailor accused of starting the fire that destroyed the USS Bonhomme Richard will face a court-martial. Today, the Navy announced that Ryan Mays will be tried in military court on 2 counts of arson. Dozens of crew members were injured in the July 2020 fire, which burned for 5 days and sent smoke billowing over San Diego. New proposed legislation aims to close a loophole to prevent gun violence. California law prohibits those convicted of a felony from possessing a firearm. Individuals convicted of certain misdemeanors, including improper use of a firearm and domestic violence, are also banned from gun ownership for 10 years. Assembly Bill 2239 would expand the list of convictions to include crimes such as child endangerment and elder abuse.
No, there is a strong correlation between domestic violence and subsequent gun violence if the abuser possesses a gun. By removing guns from these households, we can protect our most vulnerable citizens, children and seniors, from the escalating violence that occurs when abusers have unfettered access to firearms.
The bill, authored by Assemblymember Brian Mainshine, has drawn support from San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria and City Attorney Mara Elliott. While San Diegans struggle to pay their rising electric bills, SDGE's parent company is reporting over $1 billion in profits. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne tells us people are looking for answers.
Sempra, the parent company of SDGE, released their earnings for 2021. The report showed the company made $1.25 billion in earnings. $604 million were reported during the last quarter of the year. This was just as temperatures started to drop and residents started seeing higher SDG&E bills. SDG&E has stated that a rate increase comes after a 25% jump in the cost of natural gas.
The 25% increase in the wholesale price of gas doesn't seem to affect the executive salaries of SDG&E, who has 20 vice presidents all making six-figure incomes. And it certainly isn't hurting the executive compensation packages for Sempra Energy. And it just enrages me.
Kevin Kilpatrick, a professor at Cal State San Marcos, is suing SDG&E for price gouging and emotional distress.
There are hundreds of thousands of people in San Diego County who cannot afford price increases like that. And they have to make decisions about whether they're going to pay the electric bill or buy food, or even worse, buy medicine.
Kilpatrick doesn't think he'll win, but he wants to be heard.
That SDG&E is causing me and hundreds of thousands of other people tremendous stress. So I want that to stop. I'm doing it for everybody in San Diego.
The case is scheduled for April 28th at the Hall of Justice, and Kilpatrick invites anyone angry with SDG&E's rate increase to join him. Assemblymember Tasha Borner-Horvath also wants answers. In a statement, she said she is drafting a request to the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. If approved, it would task the state auditor with examining the factors and decision-making at both SDG&E and the California Public Utilities Commission that resulted in the implementation of these rates. The Assemblymember said she thinks San Diegans deserve to know why it costs more to power a house in San Diego than anywhere else in the country. We reached out to Sempra, the parent company of SDG&E, for comment, but did not hear back. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
California just passed a milestone in how we all get around. Earlier this week, the 1 millionth ZEV, zero-emission vehicle, was sold up in Stockton. KPBS reporter John Carroll looks at what the state is planning to do to accelerate that trend.
ZEVs, zero-emission vehicles. There are a lot of them on the road in the Golden State.
We have more ZEVs on road than the next 10 states combined, accounting for 40% of zero-emission cars in the country.
In a webinar today, California officials touted the state's success in promoting ZEVs. Lauren Sanchez says Governor Newsom's new budget aims at putting rocket fuel into the state's efforts to increase ZEV sales.
The governor's California Blueprint budget proposes investing $10 billion over 6 years to accelerate our ZEV goals.
Well, I've driven a lot of gas-guzzling automobiles, so I definitely have had that experience, and that's why I'll never go back.
Dave Clouden owns one of those 1 million ZEVs. He bought this Chevy Bolt a couple of years ago. He says concerns about having enough range to get from here to there are fading as batteries get better. And he says there are many other reasons to own an electric vehicle.
They have 100% torque off the line. They're faster than gasoline-powered cars. There's no maintenance. I've changed the windshield wiper fluid on this thing. There's no oil changes. There's no hoses and gaskets and, there's none of the engine parts that wear out and all of that.
Problem these days is it's hard to purchase a ZEV. They're in high demand and low supply. I asked about that at today's webinar. Leanne Rudolph of the California Air Resources Board chalked it up to supply chain issues.
So I think we need to recognize that, buying a car is challenging no matter what the platform.
Press the button.
So good luck getting anything from a Tesla to a Chevy Bolt these days. Dave Clouden would tell you it's worth the wait. I reached out to several electric vehicle dealers today to get a comment about sales volume. No one called me back, so I guess they're all too busy selling cars. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your week. We've made it to the weekend, and high pressure is going to be building across the region, which means dry weather for us in the upcoming days. Now, I do want to let you know that it is going to get a little bit breezy for us on Saturday, and we have a significant warm-up on the way for early next week. But we have another cool night for most of San Diego County. Here's a quick look at tonight's forecast. Oceanside, you're going to be dropping into the mid-30s. Escondido at 33 degrees. Farther inland, Mount Laguna, 29 degrees there for your low. Clear skies across the board. San Diego County, again, breezy for our Saturday. We don't have any alerts across our area, but check out some of the counties farther north, the higher terrain, and some of the valleys north and east of the LA Basin. These are the spots that have that wind advisory. Gusts could be between 45 and 50 miles per hour over the higher terrain. Now, here's a quick look at our Saturday. Most of California and most of the Southwest, as a matter of fact, does have that gradual warm-up, feeling a little bit more comfortable for the afternoon. In San Diego County, cities like Oceanside, we're going to be coming up to 74 degrees, Chula Vista 71, and farther inland, plenty of sunshine for both Borrego Springs and Mount Laguna. Now, looking at our Sunday, Northern California, we'll see some showers. Some of the cooler conditions are going to stay in place for the coast, but over towards our area here in the southern end of the state, we're only going to stay with quiet weather for us. And here's a look at your coastal forecast. In the upcoming days, not a lot of changes. Temperatures are going to be in the 70s, plenty of sunshine each afternoon. Inland areas, not a lot of action as well, but notice that gradual warm up, 71 on Saturday, and then by Tuesday of next week, we will be near 84 degrees. In the higher terrain, we're going from the 40s into the mid and upper 50s for Tuesday and Wednesday. A couple of clouds and a bit chilly still for us both Saturday and Sunday. Now in the deserts, we're also going to feel the warm up, 68 degrees for Saturday, and you can clearly see that early next week we will be in the 80s, mid 80s for Tuesday. I'm Marvin Gomez with your forecast for KPBS News.
Tomorrow, San Diego Unified moves a step closer to hiring its next superintendent. The two finalists for the job will face the public in a forum at Wilson Middle School in Normal Heights. KPBS education reporter MG Perez introduces us to the candidates.
The two finalists are both native Californians. Dr. Susan Enfield grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and Dr. Lamont Jackson is from Southern California. Saturday at noon, they will be together in the same room for the first time. Dr. Enfield has been superintendent of the Highline Public Schools in the Seattle area for the past 10 years.
I am a big believer that we have to choose our professional home wisely, just as we choose our personal home wisely.
Dr. Jackson is homegrown.
Born and raised in San Diego, I am a product of San Diego Unified School District. So this, to me, is home.
Jackson has been interim superintendent since last summer when Cindy Martin resigned to join the Biden administration in Washington, D.C. The job requires leadership of almost 120,000 students, 14,000 employees, including about 6,000 classroom teachers. There is a $1 billion annual operating budget, too. This is why Dr. Enfield applied.
I wanted to look for districts where I felt the values, the practices matched my own. And I believe that's the case in San Diego for so many reasons. Leadership stability at the board and staff level, a community that deeply cares about the education of its children, and a real prioritization of acknowledging the rich diversity.
In fact, the San Diego Unified student population represents 15 ethnic groups and more than 60 languages and dialects. Enfield is white. Jackson is black.
I believe this is the time for stability and for consistency and for coherence. And as a former area superintendent, chief human resource officer, a principal, a teacher, a student in this district, I believe I bring that to this district.
Dr. Enfield was interim superintendent of the 50,000-student Seattle School District before moving to the nearby Highline Public Schools in 2012. That district, with just 18,000 students, is located in neighborhoods near the SeaTac Airport. She would bring what she calls the Highline Promise to San Diego.
The emphasis on the whole child and on community and on looking at our children from an asset, not a deficit-based perspective. Those are things that are all, I think, incredibly important, knowing every student by name, strength, and need. How can we assess in San Diego children who are not known in their schools by name, strength, and need so they graduate prepared for the future they choose? And I think that would be the biggest challenge.
As interim and incumbent, Dr. Jackson assesses his district's strengths and weaknesses this way.
We were able to identify the gaps where we weren't meeting the needs of our students. We were able to identify students by name and by need and really have an aligned focus to create environments worthy of our children, to increase engagement. When we are working in isolation and not coming together as a collective group of adults to solve these questions and these problems that we face for our young people, then that would be a measure of us not achieving to the levels that we need to.
Inequity exists in San Diego Unified when it comes to the discipline of students. Statistics show that black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended than white students. The question is, how can the district do better?
I think too often, and why we see some of these disproportionate discipline numbers, is we punish the behavior before getting to the root of the problem. So making sure that a student is known, that we look into why we're seeing the behaviors that we're seeing, and then figuring out what that student needs.
We certainly have to hold them accountable, absolutely. But during that engagement and during that accountability, we have to show them compassion and love and kindness. We all make mistakes. But those of us who come out of it can point to people who've supported us. That's critical. That's how we change this narrative for our black children and all children.
Saturday at the public forum, both candidates will also answer questions about COVID vaccinations, mask mandates, virtual learning, and anything else the public wants to know. MG Perez, KPBS News.
The Padres are supposed to return to Petco Park on March 31st, but the ongoing lockout puts that in jeopardy. Mira Kopik tells us why this is a pivotal weekend for Major League Baseball in the Friday Business Report.
The deadline they're putting on Monday, the 28th, would say that they guaranteed that the season will start on March 31st, which is when it's planned. And then any day after February 28th that negotiations are delayed will mean 1 day less or more for the season. The Players Association is saying, depending on if we can get resolution over the next week or so, we can do a lot of double headers. Owners say no. And the reason is baseball players get paid per game. It isn't like you get a salary for the course of the year. You get paid every single game. What does this mean for fans? And that's the most important thing for all of us who are baseball lovers. Much shorter spring training, or actually spring training not happening at all. All those cities that are spring training meccas are going to lose significant tourist revenues, which is very difficult for their tax base. The risk of opening day being delayed, and so then there's going to be much fewer games.
Cyrano opens this weekend. It's an adaptation of a stage musical based on Edmond Rostand's famous play about a man defined by his large nose. KPBS film critic Beth Accomando has this review of the film that reimagines the title character.
Edmond Rostand's Cyrano de Bergerac gave us a charismatic character who could duel and compose poetry simultaneously, with a wit as sharp as his sword.
Then as I end the refrain, thrust home.
But because of his large nose, he believed himself too ugly to win the love of the beautiful Roxanne. In the new film, Cyrano is played by Peter Dinklage. So instead of a facial disfigurement, Cyrano is small of stature, but still larger than life.
I love this place and all it means. Poetry, romance, terror, truth. I've loved it here since early youth.
Dinklage captures the panache of Rostand's character, but sadly, the musical leaves the best of his play behind and tries to replace his wonderful poetry with trite songs.
I'd give anything for someone to say to her that she's all I can think about, and I can't live without her.
I'm sure Rostand's Cyrano would never let Christian express such pedestrian sentiments. As someone who loves Rostand's play, the musical was a huge disappointment. But one film that never disappoints, even after a half a century, is Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
The film returns to cinemas this weekend in a gorgeous 4K restoration overseen by Coppola. The film merits being seen on the big screen so you can appreciate the richly shadowed cinematography and the all-around excellent craftsmanship. The film was part of a new wave of American directors such as Coppola, who had come up through film school and independent filmmaking and then entered mainstream Hollywood. The film was both a box office hit and a critical success. It marked a comeback for actor Marlon Brando and made a star out of Al Pacino.
Then I'll kill them both.
So having The Godfather back in theaters is an offer you simply can't refuse. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you for joining us and have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.